What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Aged Out Reacts. And before we get into today's video, hit subscribe, comment, share it. You know the deal. Check out the podcast on podcast services. I'm one of the hosts of the Aged Out podcast, and with me, as always, is
Evan Worrell.
Nice delay there. But as you can see in today's
Try not
video,
to delay. Technology, baby.
Whatever. Internet. It happens. Before we get in today's video, check out LoneStarPercussion.com. Use the discount code AGEDOUT. Save yourself $10 on any order of $50 or more. And today we have an amazing guest with us, as you can see in the video title. We're hanging out with Tom Rarick again. What's up, dude? It's been a while.
What's up, guys? Good to be here.
So
yeah, man, it's been a few years since our last conversation. So glad to have you back. Obviously, really appreciate the time and really looking forward to kind of the nuance and background and just backstory of some of the stuff that we're going to watch today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Remember we did that several years ago in a hotel room in Dayton, I believe.
I was getting ready to say
it was.
Which was good times, but now we're in our own places and doing this with video and reactions, and it's the growth of the podcast and the reaction videos has been awesome. So
no, I appreciate it. I always forget how long ago it was we did your episode. It was like one of our first 10 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
The first 2015. It was early on.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
We were pretty green.
Yeah.
OG Aged Out podcast.
Oh, man. All right. So today, thank you to Robert Martinez, Bobby Butow. It is Bobby, right? We checked that before for the first video.
Butow, actually.
Butow. Apologies. And then Drum Corps Tube for the 3 videos. We're going to be going through Bluecoats 2021, 2 separate videos. One that's like a full ensemble bit of like the first part of the show, and then the next video will be from Robert Martinez, Rbase 311, I think is his YouTube handle,
It is.
of just the battery, to look at some more battery focused moments towards the end of the show from this past summer. And then we're going to end with 2015 like hybrid overlay video with the pit and the battery from Drum Corps Tube. So I'm done blabbing. I'm ready if you guys are.
Go.
Let's go.
All right, here we go. Is this finals day?
This is finals day. This is in the field house at Indiana Wesleyan.
Bienvenidos.
Yeah, this is the Timpanist one. We did a Los Bluecoats, yeah.
That's awesome.
An alternate introduction, which was awesome. Yeah. There was some stuff with like props and that kind of thing that like made doing run-throughs and like the wheels, that kind of thing. Like we had to kind of start and stop and do like kind of sectionalized type things in this field house because of the weather. But so that's why they're standing still. These are maybe the most pit notes have been played on this podcast.
You're close to it.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I always get freaked out about copyright rules.
I know. I love how you work difficulty into like groove-based stuff. That's some of the most like interesting stuff that any drum lines play to me.
I appreciate that. Can you stop there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too. Just like that whole thing, just like trying to craft those moments. I remember writing that, and like that whole beginning was based on a little help from my friends. Ba-da-da, very like open and that kind of thing. And I tried to shoehorn way too many notes into it initially, and then just it's always a process. I think when you're designing is like think about it like micro, macro, and kind of alternating back and forth. But like you have at some point you have to like kind of realize that like the whole field has a feel, and you have to support that. And then what became a little more obvious too is when they got staged, is they were kind of like behind the back hash, like a little bit offset as well. So like any intricacy, honestly, on a normal year, I probably would have rewritten that like to like be a little more open you know, like, and just like more punctuating and unison. There's a little more like as far as battery construction, just because of where they were on the field. But it was one of those things that like because of the schedule we were on this year, that like you basically when it got out there, that's you could make some little tweaks, but like that was pretty much what it was, you know.
Yeah, I would say probably on a normal year too. Once you see the drill, it's like, well, especially with the rule change now, this is probably not a moment that's going to be read super nuanced. So we're not going to like slave ourselves over trying to clean something that's not
and
the most supportive thing that it can be.
Sure. And the next thing too is like we knew that like not that we were like we knew there wasn't a judge there sampling, but we knew the next thing was happening was the battery's going to come straightforward for like kind of elongated percussion kind of moment to kind of like turn the page and like to this. We start out kind of like where the 2019 show kind of left off. If you guys remember like the first ending of the show, like way back when, you may not honestly, but eventually it became Hey Jude, the very end of the show in 2019.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The first ending was where Sergeant Pepper like went back and like closed the door, and it was "And in the end, the love you make," all that stuff. That's what that whole.
I did not remember that until you just said it.
I didn't either.
Yeah, so like the first half of the season up through San Antonio, that's what the end of the show was, and I think to a lot of us too. Not that I mean, I think both were great endings, but the first one was like more emotional. I think in a lot of ways. Like I remember being like affected by that. Wasn't sure why. It was just a guy in a costume going behind a door, but like the music and all that kind of stuff kind of it had a feeling to it. But anyhow, so that's kind of where the beginning of the show starts off. So if you guys are listening to like to the front ensemble stuff at the very beginning, like that's where all the chordal structure, that kind of thing, you'll hear little hints of the end, that Beatles tune. The kind of morphs, there's a little like drum set allusion to come together. Doom, doom, you know, like that kind of thing just kind of puts you in that place where you left off. And then a little help from my friends, and then it's this kind of like very much in the Beatles paradigm of bum bum bum, you know, like open chordal, that kind of thing. And then from that point, it pretty quickly devolves into like this kind of trippier world. You see the colors on the floor right now. You're looking at the bright colors, the kind of the psychedelic kind of like nature of like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and any association you want to put with that. So throughout this whole thing, I guess why I stopped it there is that's the point right now, is like that kind of turning point where we go from like what we left as a rock concert and kind of a celebration of Beatles music to a little more programmatic and into like Lucy's world, like devolving. So you notice all the note groupings get different. It's all like kind of 9-lit kind of based. It's like over the bar line, spacious, sustained kind of elements rather than groove stuff that we kind of had before that. So that's kind of like the long range kind of, or that for this whole section of the show. I guess that other half you haven't heard yet, right? In this play, but anyhow, so that's a little background, probably a lot of background actually on this first part of the show.
No, see, this is why I love doing this, like with you, like we did with Macintosh, because like that's stuff that obviously Evan and I have no way of knowing, and we're not engaged with the shows enough to have any kind of insight beyond like, man, that roll was really good, or that rhythmic interplay was awesome. But
sure, and that's important too. But like, you know,
this is a cool chart.
Yeah, exactly.
It should work on multiple levels when you do it the right way. Like it should work on a programmatic thing, and things you may not notice or understand why it makes sense to you. You feel like it works. Maybe you don't know, but like that's always the goal, is to have layers to the kind of the meaning for, you know, what you guys hear, and from a micro and then a macro level as well. And that's why I'm glad we're hearing the whole percussion ensemble as well.
No, for sure. All right, everybody, I'm going to perform some video magic here, and we're going to pause this recording. And then, because I'm dumb and I forgot to add Tom's video to this recording before we started. So we'll be back in about 2 seconds, but for you guys watching this, it's going to be like a fade out and a fade in, and Tom will be here. So we'll see you in a second. All right. If I got that transition right, once this logo goes away, Tom will be on video because I'm a doofus. So let's just keep on rolling. Pretend that little transition didn't happen, all you viewers out there. So let's get back into this video and just keep rolling.
It's a jam.
It's kind of the journey into Lucy's world.
Oh, I love those drags and those little presses out to the edge.
Do you pause it there?
Yeah. He's still one of the best snare drummers of this age of drum corps, hands down.
He's amazing. Like
It's
he
ridiculous.
missed that because he was going for it. Like
Yeah.
perform, like it was really cool to be able to highlight Zach specifically, and then some other guys like later in the show as well.
There's some solos in the feature, right? Like the snare feature. Yeah.
Absolutely. That whole thing was just like kind of exploring space, like we mentioned before. Like everything was kind of grooved before it and that kind of thing, and then it was like trying to like spread everything out and create this kind of like long transition into this world where what happens next is kind of this like kind of watery kind of like kind of like brass feature kind of thing. But it was trying to connect those 2 points in the show. It was like getting from this, backbeat, little help from my friends, to like where the character is introduced, and then we're in a completely different world, I guess, at that point. And that was like all the way down to like Zach playing that solo at the very end, and then like into the concert snare drum stuff. So
cool.
It was a really cool moment.
This trade-off part here is really cool between those three.
I appreciate the attention of like the difference in the tuning scheme too. Just really tell what's going on. That like kind of like pulse echo.
Standard that happens with a steel drum, trying to get that kind of dialogue. It's obviously a brass moment where they're kind of banging out the melody of Lucy in the Sky.
Good 7 strokes.
Yeah.
Were those unison with the snares and quads, or was that just?
I believe so. Yeah. I think right to left, and then like kind of a Flamacue-esque kind of idea there.
Yeah.
You pause that 1 second too.
Yep.
Something that'll come back later in the show too, but just again, during that, it's more prominently featured when they actually do it in the drill, but like during that whole kind of like transitional kind of feature we saw before the beginning of this clip, CJ, the bottom bass drummer, like kind of leads that whole thing forward. Like the original like of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, like if you know that tune, before the chorus, there's this like, it almost like kind of stops and it's out of time, and this is like kick drum, like boom, 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 like thing that like is like very iconic and sets a new tempo for the Lucy in the Sky. So that kind of 3-note grouping kind of permeates like through the arrangement. Like, so you hear it there, you hear it overtly at the end of the show, you hear it. CJ kind of plays that several times. It just, again, it's when the battery re-enters before like the brass comes in, there's another opportunity for it too. So it's one of those things, you like you said, like motifs you kind of grab onto that give you a sense of kind of connection like through the show. At least, hopefully.
Awesome. I would have never noticed that. And no. I may have noticed it if I watched it like multiple times over in a row. Yeah. But that's one of those like layering things you don't think about. You just like little kiss, the chef's kiss.
Little cherries on top, little sprinkles and secrets.
I mean, honestly, they're hopefully they're cool at some point for the listener, or like somebody that notices it or knows the tune, and even if they don't, which is fine too. But honestly, they're things that help like an arranger or somebody that like kind of piece something together and make it make sense over time. You're like, okay, what like parts of like this tune, or like what are motifs? What has meaning, or what are, what can you draw upon like that feels like a part of this show and not part of another show? Mm-hmm. I guess that
absolutely
always helps me.
All right, so you keep me honest and let me know how far you want to go into this before we switch over to just the battery video.
I'm not sure this is going to have the effects on it. I don't think it does, which you guys will probably prefer. Snare features coming up.
That was fast.
We can just let this play. I can talk about it at the end.
Sure. That's really cool. That was
Cool.
Front to
That was
back.
a,
That was really nice.
You caught there?
that was a snare feature.
Yeah. So that was without the vocoder on top of it.
Right.
So that whole part, that was actually pretty close to like what it was supposed to be in 2020. Like to peel back the curtain a little bit, like that whole like real estate to the show was kind of dedicated because we had that kind of talent in the snare line. It's like, hey, we can. Not that these guys weren't talented as well, because they surely were.
Yeah.
But that's where that kind of like part of the show like came from. It was like we were going to do this in 2020 with this same exact piece of music, just because we knew we could kind of like lean on that and just really create a situation where they could really let their talents like come to the forefront. So like, there's a couple things in there too. Like, you know, it was maybe fortuitous in a lot of ways that we weren't judged like with this thing. Like, and that's not because of the way they played. It's more like because of like the sound and the judgeability of something that's like processed through a vocoder and that kind of thing. And just we really try to take advantage of the fact that like, okay, we can experiment, and really it's about the overall. It's about how it feels, and in a world where like we're in this psychedelic kind of like space, like bending of sound and distortion and that kind of thing like feels like it has some relevance, and that's kind of where we went, you know. Like, so like Zach, who played the first solo, Zach Wilson, Sebastian Martinez played the second one, and David Ware played the third at the very beginning. Both, you know, all three of them are multi-year members of the snare line, just awesome performers. It was cool because I was able to give them kind of like a pretty broad sketch, like a rhythmic kind of structure. I tried my best with things, but knowing that like they would come up with things that were, you know, current, cool things that, more importantly, felt great to them, that they could reproduce like really naturally on a nightly basis, and that felt amazing in their hands. And then we kind of like, you know, so it's like, okay, so can you use a little more energy here? Can you put a rim shot here? Like we realized things that like through the vocoder sounded better, that were like kind of like overt, kind of like accents, like rim shots. They really spiked and had a difference. Things like Sebastian's solo, like you don't hear it here, but like he had more, something was more like an accelerated roll, started kind of slower and really sped up and crescendoed. Those things where you can really hear like a controlled, like the control is like the diddle pattern, and then the effect on top of that. Those things read better. So for us, this is a lot of experimentation, and it was the opportunity to kind of like add like, what is it like when you like try and apply harmony to the snare drums? Like they're in three different groups. We add like, as they come together, we add like the first part of that is all like bo bo doo dee, bo bo doo dee, just like it's kind of like one note kind of thing. Then we add thirds, then we add fifths, or we add the fifth. So by the time we're the last phrase, it's the whole intro to "I'm the Walrus." Ba ba da da doo da da. Which you hear. I mean, again, these are like more subtle things, maybe, because there's a snare feature happening. There's a lot of things happening, but the idea was to like apply harmony to the snare drum, and what happens when we do that, and how can we explore the possibilities of tonality with the battery, or with the snare feet,
awesome.
the snares themselves.
No, that's really cool. I thought it was a great moment, and it makes perfect sense to me. Like everyone we've had on here that teaches, you got to play to your strengths. If you know you're going to have a killer snare line or a killer bass line, or your marimba players are going to be just experienced and just great, you want to play that up. Like you want to highlight where you're going to be able to be given the most credit from a competitive standpoint. And it's just, why not? Why not let them, like you said, you gave them a little bit of creative freedom. You gave them a skeleton, let them say what's going to feel good for you for those first three solos. And it makes sense. You just run with what you got. It's almost like a sports coach of like a basketball team or something, like, all right, we're going to tweak my system this year a little bit based on the personnel that I have. It's just, makes perfect sense. So,
that wasn't an insult to the players that we had this year that weren't the all vet thing.
No.
They were amazing. Like, it wasn't that they didn't deserve that moment because some of them were new. It was just something was already there, and it was like, we're just going to run with this.
Yeah.
And go because we had
Might
the
as well.
players. Yeah. So we learned a lot by doing it. I'm glad we experimented and, and all that. So
I think that's one of the positives that definitely came out of this weird shortened season with not really a competitive aspect in there. You said it right here. We've talked to a few other people that said the same thing, like Colin McNutt when we talked to him recently. Like, sure. You were able to take risks this year to try things that maybe you wouldn't have been as open to trying in a normal competitive season, because you're like, if this doesn't work out, like, crap, stick a fork in us, we're done. Or like, it's just, so I think a lot of really cool things and people tried stuff, and I think there's a lot of positives that still came out of this summer. So
yeah, it's a great opportunity to innovate.
Yeah, definitely.
I haven't really talked to anybody that really missed it, honestly.
The competitive side of it.
Not that we don't enjoy competing and all that kind of thing, but there was a certain I don't know. It was cool.
Relief.
Like after shows, it was like we evaluated our own performance and we got on the bus and went and did it again. And it didn't feel like we had less purpose because of it. That's for sure. It was.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
All right. You want to keep going on this one or switch? Is there more?
We can switch. Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So we will switch over to Robert Martinez, Mr. Drum Corps Coffee Shop himself.
There he is.
Finals lot. All right, this thing just starts with a bass moment, and this is kind of the last like 3 or 4 minutes are pretty battery focused and beefy stuff. So.
Come together.
I love how you can hear the tune in the writing now.
Yeah,
you can hear the chart.
Also,
the Girls bass line has the best tuning. You can almost anyone.
Can you pause there, actually? But that was something too. When you guys were talking over it too, which is totally cool. But yeah, they were
like, shut up.
No, because I was just thinking of what to say too. You were saying the same thing I was thinking what you were saying, honestly. But like, there's I think what we tried to do, like with this kind of feature too, is like certainly like there's the come together thing at the very beginning, and there's like some technique stuff, but there's also like moments where like they can actually play for a couple beats on one drum, where like you hear the boom, 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 like the kind of protracted like Lucy theme, like in the bass drums. I'm not sure that it probably never came across, but again, these are things that give like arrangers meaning. I think when you're like. They sound like consecutive triplet rolls, maybe, when you're watching a lot video, but they actually are outlining what the marimbas are doing at that same time with like a half-note version of the Lucy arpeggios. Could you rewind it, Mike?
Yeah, I was actually going to replay it without me blabbering over it.
Yeah, then I won't talk to.
Yeah, because the first thing's all that.
Yep.
Here we go.
When tuning matters.
Yep.
all age outs in the bass line.
Really?
Yep. I'll just hold open, everybody. I seem to always end up writing a cross-stick groove of some sort.
I was actually about to point that out. I was about to point that out.
Yeah.
But it's always so tasty.
It works. It works.
I'm glad you guys like them because they're like it's like an insecure thing because it seems very skeletal and very basic in a lot of ways. But I'm not usually disappointed when I hear them in context. But then when like I see a lot video, I'm like, oh my god.
Oh, I did it again.
It's like we get it.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
I think a lot of our music, at the Bluecoats, especially like with the Beatles and with just some of the more like kind of groove oriented things we tend to gravitate towards. There's only so many ways I think to like kind of like keep like a percussive energy. Well, actually, there's probably a lot of ways to do it. One of the ways I guess that I gravitate towards is like just kind of this composite drum set kind of thing, like on the like within the battery, and then like a lot of that is like cross stick. You have the energy of the bass drums, and then tenors kind of color, or usually kind of adding in through the phrase and in between. Like the tenors, they have all this like that was one of my most insecure parts actually writing this part for the tenors. I don't think you can see them on this video maybe, but they just have like 1E, 2E, 3, but up, but up, but up, but up, but up. And again, not to get too like inside baseball, but like the beginning of this whole chart was this like delay thing we did with the brass, where they would play but up, and then it would repeat like through. They would play it once, and then it would repeat like through the sound system and kind of echo. So it was but up, but up, but up, but up, and that was kind of a like that kind of added together and created this kind of texture. And then this is like the tenor is doing that same thing, kind of like mimicking that but up, but up, but up. So there's, I think for everybody, not just me obviously, but for everybody who writes and that kind of thing, there's always a purpose for what you're writing, I think.
Yeah, I always default to, whenever I hear something come from a battery that's something very minimalistic like that, or you're out of nowhere, you're just like, all right, there's got to be something going on in the field that makes that relevant. Like, I'm not going to overthink that. Like, yeah, it's probably pretty hard, objectively speaking, to go 1E, 2E, 3E, like with like 5 dudes or girls or guys. Like, so that itself's difficult, but it's simple. But every time I hear something like that, that's kind of out of nowhere, I'm just like, well, there's got to be something that fits perfectly.
What's the bigger picture?
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
It's Zoom effective or cool. I'm just saying there's a reason.
Yeah.
but they ended up loving this part. They're like, I've had numerous people go, that's my favorite part of the show. I'm like, really? It's always the parts you don't expect usually.
Yeah.
That resonate.
All right, let's keep this rolling.
I love the independence structure of it too. I mean,
yeah,
it seems maybe sounds simple in nature, but
it's trying to create a big drum set, really.
Oof. All the way down, all the way up.
Yep.
The bass drums totally drove this whole cello rondo. This goes from 184 or 168 to 204.
Oof.
Damn.
They were beasts.
Yeah.
The bass layering over top of that is just magnificent.
Can you pause there?
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple shout outs with that stuff. The tenor feature was, well, the bass drums, as I was saying before, they drove that whole. It was a long accelerondo. It was like over 20 bars or so, like like where it was incremental, it was metered out, but like they drove that whole thing, like, and it was engineered that way because we knew we had those players to be able to control that and do it. So they did an amazing job with that. The tenor feature, I remember working with early in the season, early in the process with Suvin and Greg, the two tenor techs, and the players, like to kind of craft that, like again, like kind of like that. The solos we had in part 2 with the snares, like, kind of gave them a roadmap, like, and a general kind of direction and like accent patterns, those kinds of things, and then let them kind of go with it, and it kind of meet in the middle with all that. The snare feature that happened after that, I remember I had some really lame things written, like that. Here's something too. It's like I'm sitting here and going, like left hands, like like I'm like, oh, that'll be cool. They'll do something with the visual, like it'll be like. It'll be neat, like, and I could see it in my head, and we get it on the field, and it's like, wow, that feels slow. It feels really weird. It feels like, I don't know, like not worthy, like vocabulary wise. And I was thinking it. I hadn't said anything, and then remember Zach texted me like one day while they were moving. He's like, "Hey, do you mind if I like kind of like mess around with this a little bit?" I'm like, "Absolutely." And like we trade back and forth like with like stuff written down on napkins and like back and forth and like arrive at something that like is kind of the players and like still of the structure that I kind of like kind of like set up, but then they take it and make it their own. Those are the coolest things for me. When you see it kind of just elevate from like something that's like on my drum pad that's beside me here to like something that feels like it's like they feel ownership and it's something they really enjoy performing.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
That's really
Perfect
cool.
Marriage.
Yeah. Collaboration.
Yep.
Isolated lefts.
There's your Lucy kick drums too.
Yeah.
Joe. This is all the stuff from 2019. Like note for note.
Good roll.
We knew we were going to play the same exact music right here, and I really didn't feel confident that I could do it better. And that's not a compliment to myself necessarily. Like I was like out of ideas. Like the way it's written is it's like in 12/8 at like 90 some beats a minute. It looks like somebody threw pepper at a piece of paper and just connected the dots. It's like so many notes, and I spent so much time on like 12 bars that last 30 seconds that I was like, I don't even know how to go about reconceptualizing this. So I'm just gonna do it. We can probably move on, Mike. I mean, not that this stuff isn't cool too, but this is like the anthem ending kind of things. So
I'm actually, because it's the runtime
What
version,
skiers?
I just wanted to stop you before the cross stick grooves start again.
Is there really more cross stick grooves?
Can you see their hands?
Oh God. It's blurred on my screen, so I didn't even see it.
Okay,
I know I said at the beginning of this video, everyone, that we're going to do 15 in this video. We're actually going to close this one out for runtime purposes to give us a second upload. So I'm going to say thanks everyone for hanging out. We'll be back in the next video, part 2 of this with Tom, which we are incidentally going to record immediately after I stop this recording. Thanks, everybody. Check out the podcast services, social media, LoneStarPercussion.com, discount code AgedOut. And we'll see you in part 2 to check out some 2015 and get some inside information.
Peace.